Thank you, Donna and Andrea, for inviting me. This is sort of one of the funner groups that I address. You guys don't suffer from the same preconceptions that we do in the industry. Well, I'll do an informal conversation, but I really want to get this interactive as soon as possible, so I'll solicit your questions pretty quickly. But just to give you a little sense of my context. I'm not a media person. I'm a physicist. I left physics to go into science publishing, and then I did economics at The Economist for 7 years, and then sort of freakishly got this call from Condé Nast in 2001. I'd never heard of Condé Nast, but I'd heard of this guy James Truman because I read Spy magazine. They used to make fun of him, and he was the editorial director. And he called me in 2001 and asked me if I wanted to take over Wired. And I wasn't an editor. I wasn't a media guy. I was doing economics. I was surprised by the call. But Wired was a special magazine for me because in 1993, when I was in the physics world, this magazine came out. And it's important to remember what the world was like in 1993, which none of you were all preschool at the time, but if you were born. The internet started in the physics world. The web browser was created by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN, the physics facility. So we used this thing every day, and we knew what it was for. The web was for communicating with other physics laboratories. And the internet was to telnet into the Cray supercomputer. It was very clear. It was a scientific tool. And it never appeared to be anything more than a scientific tool. We were really good at it, but we never really saw it as more than that. And then this magazine popped on my desk. 1993, it's Wired, and it's like the end of the nation state, totally new culture, upending democracy, institutional undermining, transformative. You remember all this. And I bought into it hook, line, sinker. I was like, oh my God. I'm present at the creation. This is the beginning of a revolution. I am so lucky. I just happened to be one of the first guys using this thing. They're right. This is a big deal. I'm changing my career. And so I went to The Economist as their, to start their internet coverage, and registered economist.com on my credit card. And I was one of the first of many people to fuck up their web strategy. It was Michael Hirschhorn, who's very smart on these things, claims that the reason The Economist is doing so well as a magazine is because they have such a bad web strategy, and the only way to get the magazine is to pay top dollar for it, which is probably true on some level. We'll get to that later. Anyway, so then in 2001, when James Truman gave me the call, I took the job because this magazine had changed my life, and I thought that the revolution. This was after 9/11. Actually, it was just before 9/11, but it was after the stock market crash, the NASDAQ crash. Things looked dire, and I made a bet that the revolution was just beginning, that the internet's and the web's ability to transform the world was not a stock market bubble. It wasn't a fraud. It wasn't. You guys are also too young to remember, probably most of you, what the world thought about technology in 2001. But it was a lot like what they think about hedge funds right now. They thought it was largely a Ponzi scheme. And we bet against that. And we thought that, in fact, that there was a difference between the stock market treatment of dot-coms and the underlying platform that we were building collectively, both as a business and, more importantly, as not a business, and that this was a big deal. So we bet on that, and I'm pleased to say we were right. So I decided to enter the media world, and today the paradoxes and ironies in my life abound. When I started Wired, we didn't have the website. We weren't Wired. We'd sold the website after a failed IPO. We'd sold the website to a company called Lycos, and then to Terra, and then to Telefonica. So Wired didn't have a website. Okay, that's irony number one. Irony number two is that Wired, which was celebrating the end of the corporate institutions of the 20th century, was owned by Condé Nast, and we still are. I then proceeded to Wired is magazine about digital culture that's printed on dead trees. I then proceeded to do some work and write books. I wrote The Long Tail, which is about the end of the monopoly of the blockbuster. The 20th century was defined around mass markets in limited channels of distribution: television, radio, retail, all of which have limited capacity, and as a result, only have room for the blockbuster, the bestseller. My very company is built around blockbuster and bestseller magazines. My own magazine, 750,000 circ, is one could argue a mass market product, and yet I write a book celebrating the niche, the small, the very things that we don't do. My next book is called Free, about the business models built around free, and meanwhile at work I'm trying to figure out how to charge more for the magazine. We celebrate the arising of a new media and the sort of the end of traditional media models, and yet I came this morning from 4 Times Square, a skyscraper built very much on 20th century monopolies, and we hope they continue as long as possible. So you could call them hypocrisy, or you could call them just the sort of the inevitable paradoxes and dualities of the modern world, which is that there is no one model that fits all. We live in a messy world. It's going to get messier, not less messy. We have to be able to hold opposing beliefs simultaneously. We have to be able to live in the head and live in the tail. We have to be able to make the most of the old world even while we explore the new world. We have to be prepared to break what we've got, to build something new. And we also have to be prepared not to freak out by the current climate and forget what it is, why it is that we are successful at what we're doing. So that's the context I come to you at. I spend a lot of times in boardrooms in Condé Nast thinking about what we're doing, and none of those times are as useful as the times we spent out there actually doing stuff. We do a lot of experiments online. Some of them you know about, some of them you don't know about. Some of them are under the Wired brand, some of them are not. I mean, just my own personal stuff, just the stuff that I run day to day. There's our print properties, there's our web properties, some of which I run, some of which I don't. We have then sub-brands. I have 5 small children, and I started a site called Geek Dad about geek parenting, on trying to find the intersection between things that are fun for us and things that are fun for our kids, as opposed to what is normally true, which is things that are fun for our kids but really boring for us, or things that are fun for us and really boring for our kids. Lego robotics turns out to be the perfect Venn intersection there. I started a robotics company, and I run a social media site focused on aerial robotics called DIY Drones, where we make open source unmanned aerial vehicles, open source Predators. Incredibly narrow, incredibly focused, but also incredibly interesting to see how this works. I have a startup company called BookTour, which we just sold to Amazon, which is built around trying to fix one of the most broken aspects of the book marketing, which is the physical appearance of an author trying to find an audience out there. And we've just got integrated into Amazon. We're going to announce that this week. So we do lots and lots of experiments. Those are just the ones that worked. I won't even tell you about all the hundreds that we've done that failed. And yet I learn more from that than any kind of brainstorming we do in the boardrooms of 4 Times Square. And if there's anything I would leave you with, it's none of us know anything. If someone tells you they know what works today, they're deceiving themselves or possibly lying. None of the old models can be guaranteed to work. We don't know whether this is a cycle or a secular change. We don't know whether these revenues have become detached and will reattach, or become detached and just go elsewhere. We don't know how much of our existing business model was built around habit and how much of it was built around real business sense. None of us know anything. And the only way we're going to find out is by doing lots and lots of experiments. This is what we call failing fast. We would rather succeed fast, but success is unpredictable. We would rather, if we're going to fail, we'd rather not fail slowly and expensively, which is the way we used to do it. So now we're going to try to fail fast. Maybe someday maybe we'll have a few successes along the way, and we'll build on that. But nobody knows anything. So, in that spirit of experimentation, I'll just dive into a little bit about The Long Tail, which I think most of you already know. A little bit more about Free, which is I think which is the book that's coming out in a month's time, and you're among the first people in the world actually to get it. Yes, Monday was the first people, and you're the second people in the world to get the book. So, show it off. The long tail, just a show of hands, how many are familiar with the long tail? Okay, so I'll do a little review, and I desperately want a whiteboard or something I can scribble on. Is there a whiteboard behind here? No? Just a piece of paper. Okay. So the long tail it came about as I was again. I'm not a media person. If you go to my office, you will not see pictures. You won't see words. What you'll see is equations and charts. It's incredibly annoying for my staff, but it's just the way I work. And the way the long tail started was simply just analyzing data sets. Thank you. Gosh, that was asked for a whiteboard and one appears. So this is, thank you. I'll wait till you stop before I draw. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'll be using it more. These? Perfect, okay. One of the standard ways of doing analysis of markets of any sort is to look at the I'll use dollar signs for lack of a better thing. Look at the sales and look at the number of products. So let's say you've got let's say you're in a supermarket. These are all the products you have, starting with cereal, and this would be the sales of each. And what you'll see traditionally is something that looks like that. It's called a power law or a Pareto distribution, and it is pretty much universal. This is basically what the world looks like, which is to say some things are very popular. So this would be the number one product, and this would be the number, N, where N in a supermarket is 50,000. N on television might be 500 shows. So this could be the television shows, the most popular television show, and down to the least popular. So maybe there's 500 shows on at any one time. In a bookstore, N is 50,000, maybe 100,000 books. In Blockbuster, N is about 3,000 DVDs, et cetera. And they all look like that. Not surprising, not new. The Pareto is named after Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian economist in the 19th century, who observed this in the Italian economy. That he found that that a small number of people had most of the wealth, land, money, etc. He looked throughout Europe, and he found this was true, that a small number of people had a large amount of the wealth. And this is where the 80-20 rule comes from, that 20% of the population has 80% of the wealth, and 20% of the population has 80% of the land. And this 80-20 rule kind of describes most markets. You've heard it before. It's interesting that this was considered a real bug in 19th century Europe. It was considered a failure of egalitarian policies, and it was a reflection of class divisions and educational disadvantage and poor governance. And so socialism, Marxism, Maoism, all these kind of things, all these attempts to redistribute wealth were all efforts to try to flatten the curve so that 50% of the population had 50% of the wealth. And they all failed. And they failed just not because they're poor economic models, although they certainly were in that manifestation, but because this is the natural shape of our species. And it's because of something called network effects, which is basically word of mouth. Rich get richer, popularity snowballs into more popularity. You see this. This is exactly a distribution of Twitter followers. Some people have lots of Twitter followers, lots of people have few. This is the distribution of traffic to your blogs. This is the distribution of friends on your Facebook pages. It is whenever you have network effects, you get something called preferential attachment, which is that highly attached nodes become more attached. They tend to attract more followers. And you end up with this unequal distribution of popularity. So what's new, about this? Well, what's new is that when you're talking about culture, what's new is this line here. Culture, as defined as the stuff that we consume, has been dictated by distribution channels. So again, I grew up in the era of television, and television culture was dictated by how many channels you had. So, I mean, you won't believe this, but I think I had 5 channels growing up. And when I came home from school, I could watch Gilligan's Island or soap operas. And so I, like everybody else my age, watched Gilligan's Island coming home. Not because we necessarily wanted Gilligan's Island or liked Gilligan's Island, although we thought we did, but because it was the only choice we had. And Gilligan's Island had an incredible market share. And if you look at the viewership of the #1 TV show over time, going from the 1950s to today, it goes exactly like that. This is the #1 show. And it goes from, in the 1950s, things like I Love Lucy, 70% of American homes watched it at the same time on the same night, Sunday night. And today, the #1 show is lucky to get, so this was 70%, and today the #1 show is lucky to get about 12%. And that's going to continue falling till 1% and below. And the reason is not because television is getting worse, it's because we have more choice. As we went from 5 channels to 25 channels to digital to cable with 50, 80, 100 channels to digital cable with 500 channels to the internet with infinite number of channels, we have more choice and the audience fragmented. And what that reveals is that, in fact, we're not all alike. Although the statistics of the 20th century suggested that we liked primetime television and we liked top 40 radio and we liked whatever was sold in Blockbuster, in Blockbuster and Walmart, it turns out that we were only choosing from what we were offered. And we were not offered very much because the distribution channels of the 20th century, radio, television, theaters, retail, had limited shelf space. And the way to think about the internet is as infinite shelf space. The internet does not discriminate between the small and the large. It is what they call scale agnostic. The internet has room for everything. And when it has room for everything, and most importantly, the cost of that shelf space is 0, you don't have to be discriminating about what you put on the shelf. And if you don't have to be discriminating about what you put on the shelf, then you don't have to be discriminating about who can put things on the shelf. And it doesn't have to be a guy in a suit in a boardroom in 4 Times Square that decides what you see. The 20th century was determined by people like me trying to guess at what people like you wanted. And if we thought this was something you wanted, we would let it out through our scarce and expensive distribution. The internet is determined by people like you doing what you want without asking anybody's permission and no gatekeepers required. And everybody has something to contribute, whether it's video or audio or text or comments or simply your click trails are a signal that changes the world in some small way. And so what we're seeing right now is basically a radical expansion in distribution capacity. And that radical expansion in distribution capacity has come with it a radical expansion in the diversity and variety and range of what's available. And what we're discovering is what we like. We're now discovering, so all that was out there. Differences in people were always out there. Different passions, cultures, perspectives were always out there. What wasn't out there was a way to distribute those on a global basis. So now that we have a choice from everything, now we can find out what we really like. And what we're discovering is that we don't just like the blockbusters. We don't just like Gilligan's Island. We don't just like whatever's being sold in Walmart. So the long tail is, if this is where 20th century distribution ends, and this is where 21st century distribution begins, the long tail is everything else. Everything else that didn't pass the economic test of 20th century distribution, but does pass, but because there are no tests, and on the internet gets out there. And what we're discovering is the real shape of consumer demand. And the real shape of consumer demand is both. We like our American Idol. Some of us do. We also like our niche subjects. And when you think about it, I could quiz you one by one through this room. I would bet that the things you are most passionate about are the things you don't share with anybody else in the room. It's the things that define you as a unique individual. So we can all agree that we're interested in the weather, we're interested in politics, etc. But it may be your hobby. It may be your art interest. Just something as simple as musical taste. If I were to ask each one of you what your favorite band is right now, I'd be surprised if we had more than 10 people agreeing on the same band. It's because we all have different tastes, and we're at different times of our discovery and different experiences, etc. This is why there is no playlist. There's no top 40 playlist. There's no DJ who has the right formula for all of you. We have to make our own playlist. And the fact is that as your engagement goes from superficial, the common culture tends to be superficial culture, and niche culture tends to be really engaged personal culture. You actually care more about what's in the tail than you do in the head, and sometimes you'll pay more for it as well. Amazon discounts the New York Times bestsellers by 40%, and they discount the tail by 0%. That means they charge more for niche books than they do for the head. Wall Street Journal gives away their most popular content, and they charge for their niche content about various, commodity markets, because the people who really want this niche content know why they want it, and they're price insensitive. On Wired.com, our pages on the homepage are CPM based. Our ads on the homepage are sold on a CPM basis, and we get commodity CPMs because we can't differentiate the audience. If you go all the way down to the tail to Geek Dad, our parenting site, and even further to my robotics site, the CPMs go up. The more niche the content, the higher the value of the ads, because what you found is people really know why they're there. They know what it is. They know what the content is. They value it. It's differentiated. It's not something you can find elsewhere, and it's much easier to target ads. So you see these kind of strange inverse relationships where the value, even though the attention is still divided between head and tail, value starts to accrete to the tail. Now, of course, it's on small volumes, so it's very hard to build a business. Nobody gets rich off running an aerial robotics site. Even if your CPMs are really high, because the total traffic is so low. But it's, if you can aggregate enough of them, then you can start to see something valuable, and that's what Google has done. Google has aggregated all the niches and found a way to sell them as one. Google has found a critical mass of advertisers because they have a self-serve model, and a critical mass of content suppliers because they serve the internet with AdSense, and they match them. Supply-demand matching at the niche level. That's why Google is the giant it is right now. So that's the long tail. The long tail is all this. It is the rise of the niche and the recognition that the blockbuster model, we were all trained on, represents half of the market, half of who we are. The niche model, which makes no sense for us blockbuster companies, is actually where the new market is. And the advantage for new companies is to figure out how they can scale their economics so they work for niches, not just mass. Okay, so that's the last book. So how did I get to the new one? So as I was thinking about what infinite shell space has done, infinite shell space has changed the world. It's created a new culture. I thought, how do you get infinite shell space? We get infinite shell space where shell space costs nothing. The reason shell space costs nothing is because, as you know, Moore's law, the marginal cost of production for digital items is close to zero. The marginal cost is what it costs to create one more version and distribute it. It's close to zero. And because the Moore's law means that everything digital falls in price by 50% every year, because processing gets cheaper, bandwidth gets cheaper, storage gets cheaper. That means that if it doesn't cost zero today, it'll cost zero tomorrow. So that's how we get infinite shell space. The marginal cost of production is close to zero. So that's what free can do. Free shell space changed the world. So what else can free do? And I looked around and I realized that today we've built a sort of a Germany-sized economy online. It's about the size of the online economy in Germany, based on a default price of zero. It's never happened in history. We've never had an economy with a default price of zero before. So I'm like, well, there must be a theory on this, right? There must be an economic model for free. There's nothing. There's nothing at all. It's really bizarre. One of the problems is that the definition of economics is the science of choice under scarcity. And what we're talking about here is abundance. You don't have to. There's no scarcity of distribution on the internet, and that's why economics has had a hard time coming up with models, because you get divide by zero errors every time you put in the scarcity function. So, so I sat down with my editor at Hyperion. By the way, other paradox, contradiction in my life. My book about the end of the blockbuster monopoly and the rise of the niche is published by Disney, as is my next one. Hyperion is Disney's book arm. So I sat down with my editor from Disney, and I said, so here's this thing. Here's this economic model that I'm going to build out. It's about the economics of abundance. And he's like, yeah. Okay, so the title of your book is Free. I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be better. Okay. And so what I realized is in that moment when he just crystallized the whole thing and says, the title of the book is Free, I realized it's actually not about economics. It's about a word. It's about perhaps the most misunderstood word of our time. Free is incredibly misunderstood both over time. Its meaning in the 20th century is changing in the 21st. It's super misunderstood in the English language. The word free has two meanings in English. There's free as in freedom, and there's free as in no price. In Latinate languages, Italian, French, Spanish, you have two words. One's based on the Latin root gratis, which is no price, and the other on the Latin root libera, which means freedom. So, in English, because we munge the two together, you get the positive connotations of freedom with the sort of mixed connotations of gratis, because there's usually a marketing trick involved. So it's very confusing. Now, you might wonder, why is it that we made this? Why is it that English munges together these two words? And it actually comes from Old English, sort of Norse-influenced England, where it was a tribal society. And it turns out that the word free comes from the same root as friend. In that tribal society, you basically had two classes. There was your family members, who were members of your tribe, and then were your slaves. And your slaves had to be paid. You had to provide the room and board and all that stuff, but they were also not free to go. So your friends were those who were tied to you by social ties. You didn't have to pay them, but they were also free to go, whereas your slaves were tied to you by financial ties. You had to pay them, and they were also not free to go. Free is in price, free is in liberty, munched together into one word, free, and friends are your people tied to you by social ties, not economic ones. So that's how we got to that's how we got the semantic confusion about the word itself. Now, what about the changing meaning over time? So 20th century free is basically the razor and blades model. This is King Gillette. It actually started a few years before with Jell-O, as you'll discover when you read the book. It's the opening chapter. The razor and blades model is basically saying you give away one thing to sell another. That free in the 20th century, in a world of atoms, of real stuff, where the marginal cost of production is not zero, has to be a trick. There's no new economic model. These things have real costs, and if you're going to give away, buy one, get one free is not free. Free gift inside is not free. Razors and blades aren't free because you need to pay for the razors. You get the cell phone for free, you pay for the minutes, not free. It's coming out of one pocket or the other. You're paying now or you're paying later, but sooner or later you're going to pay. This is why you hear these phrases, there's no such thing as a free lunch, you get what you pay for, all this kind of stuff. These all came out of the sort of 20th century use of free as a very compelling marketing proposition, but ultimately not a new economic model. It's there's a trick. There's a catch to 20th century free. Now you move forward to 21st century free. 21st century free is built around bits, not atoms. Remember, atoms are non-zero marginal cost, and atoms are inflationary. Atoms are the stuff. It's the clothes you're wearing. It's the chairs you're sitting in. It's the room we're in. Everything here gets more expensive over time. The price of the real estate this room is on right now is not going to fall in price. It's going to rise in price. The salaries that you guys can hope to get, or your GDP is going to tend to go up over time. So this is an inflationary economy, because the world of atoms is inflationary. Prices tend to go up. The world of bits is deflationary. Everything in bits tends to get cheaper. So your price of storage is going to get cheaper. Your bandwidth, the amount of bandwidth you're going to get for the same dollar is going to go up. The processing power for the same dollar goes up, and everything digital gets cheaper over time. We've never before had an industrial economy built around deflationary inputs. This is absolutely for this length of time. There's been brief moments in history where we had a step change that was deflationary. When we went from muscle power to steam power. Steam power was cheaper. We had a brief moment of that. We went from hand production to assembly lines with Henry Ford. We had a brief decline in prices. But then very quickly, it stabilized, and then it got more expensive again. Cars aren't getting cheaper by and large. Bits are the only one that gets cheaper and cheaper decade after decade, probably as far as we can see. In the same way that we're at the beginning of the internet, we're still really at the beginning of the new physical lands we explored with semiconductors, quantum mechanics lands, the subatomic scale. We have decades still to go. So this is the first industrial economy built on falling prices. And when prices fall, they all go the same way, which is to zero. So the law of the land, the law of gravity online is that everything digital will become free. Now that's not to say that free will be the only price in the marketplace, but that free will be an option. And what this means is that because we are all going into a digital world, what this means is that we're going to compete with free, like it or not. Right now we already do. So anyone of you who comes from paid media is competing with free media. Some of that free media comes from companies, more of it comes from individuals. We in the monetary economy are competing with the non-monetary economy. The Britannicas are competing with the Wikipedias. The Microsofts are competing with the Linuxes. We, the media, we, the magazines are competing with the blogs, the Facebooks, the Twitters. All that content driven by non-monetary economics. The incentives of reputation, the incentives of attention, the incentives of expression. All those things that turned out to be more motivating and can create better content than money. It's completely paradoxical. I mentioned GeekDad, our parenting blog. GeekDad has 20 writers. Not a single one of them is a professional journalist. They're not paid. GeekDad does 1 million page views a month. These are dads, by and large, civil engineers, whatever. These are people who had cognitive surplus. They had spare cycles. Their day jobs didn't tap all of their skills and potential. They wanted to be writers, but they weren't professional writers, and we gave them an opportunity to be writers. They're fantastic. We pick the best ones, and we coach them on how to be better, but they're growing really fast. We offered them $10 a post, and they were insulted, and actually they actually stopped writing. Then we offered them $0 a post, and they were much happier. They're not writing for money. They're writing for other reasons. They're writing to get a readership. They're writing to express themselves. They're writing to realize a long-held dream of being a writer. They're writing for reputation. They're writing for their children. They're writing for fun. They're writing for all these things that we in the professional media thought were not sufficient to get people to write, and we were wrong. In print, we pay people $3 a word. Online, and especially on the blogs, we pay people $0 a word. Guess which market's growing faster? This is really interesting, and we have to reset a lot of our assumptions about what is media, what is journalism, what is news, who are journalists, who is in media, who are we competing with? Are we competing with Time? Are we competing with Twitter? What does the world want from us? What can we as the professionals still add to this? Now, it turns out that I think that my business card right now says editor-in-chief. I think that if one of my children follows my footsteps, their business card will say community manager. I think that my skills as an editor are largely turn out in retrospect to be my skills as a manager. It's in motivating and incentivizing people to do great work. And it turns out you can do it. That money is, the way I motivate right now is basically with a paycheck. Turns out it's actually much more interesting to motivate with these social factors. Invite people in, coach them, help them get better, bring them an audience, train them to do what they want to do better, encourage them, pair them up with other people, give them exclusive, use whatever power I have in mainstream media to give them exclusive access to things they wouldn't otherwise get. And they feel incredibly privileged to be part of this. So, what we're doing catalytically with amateurs is in many ways more powerful than what we're doing financially with professionals. So, community management, that's the future of media. I think I'm going to stop now. And talking the books, I know you guys have lots of questions. That's the kind of the overview. I can go any direction you want. Obviously, we're talking a lot about the future of newspapers, paid versus free, various business models. The floor is yours. So, this is you're talking to a Jurassic figure right here. I'm in one of those businesses. We're Condé Nast. We have these meetings. We would this phrase, put the genie back in the bottle. We made a mistake. We didn't make a mistake. This wasn't our choice to make. This is the underlying economics. We were going to compete with free, like it or not. If we charge, then people will just go somewhere else where they don't charge. This is the time when we could turn the dial and have the business model we wanted. That time ended when we lost monopoly distribution. Right around 1999 was when we lost the ability to turn any dials. So good luck to them. Now that's not to say that we're not going to find ways to charge for content. But it's not going to be this binary divide between free versus paid. It's going to be free versus freemium. And I think the chapter I would point you to first in the book is really about freemium models. Freemium says use free for what free does best, which is to maximize your audience, to reach it, to bring them, because the barriers to entry to free are 0, and then convert some fraction of them to paid, not by sort of walling off your core content, but by creating new content that has things that people will pay for. So whether it's sort of the Wall Street Journal is going to say, okay, the main stories, the most popular stories are free, et cetera. But as you get more and more niche, as you start to bring in data from Barron's and financial data, unique stuff, then we start charging. That's fine. That makes sense. Maybe you subscribe to Wired for $10. The website's for free. But if you want to be part of our, special Super Wired Club, which I'm just making up as we speak, you'll get other stuff, unique stuff, and maybe that'll be $50 or $60 or $80, and maybe we'll send you books as well, or maybe you'll get a digital edition before anybody else, or you'll be, I don't know, we'll have to, we'll think of things. And I'm specifically telling you things we're not thinking about. We will think of things, ways to charge, but this debate has been completely mischaracterized as free versus paid. No one in the right mind, and even ESPN gives away a lot of content for free, no one in the right mind would go to 100% paid at this point, unless they are super, super niche. Well, I guess Consumer Reports would be the one exception. Super niche, probably industry verticals, things like that. And anybody who wants to try, if the New York Times wants to go to 100% paid, you can only see their content if you pay. Good luck to them. The New York Times will survive. The Wall Street Journal will survive. I live in San Francisco. Have you ever read the San Francisco Chronicle? Yeah. So they're not going to charge. They're not going to be able to charge for their content. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure anyone's going to read their content for free. The vast majority of media doesn't have the value, doesn't have the sort of unique value proposition of a Wall Street Journal and New York Times. And so they're going to be fine. They'll try any model, and one will work eventually. For most of us, that's not an option. So, the current issue, which you have in your hands, do you have the current issue? Oh, okay. So I see there's some over here. This one's strapped down. The current issue speaks to that directly. You can say socialism redefined. So I would prefer this to you, but what's wrong with so here's what's good about the socialist model, and I'm not going to go back to the 19th century as originally conceived. The socialist model was built on collective action. The notion that individuals had a voice and could properly organized do a better job than companies, for example, or bureaucrats. The problem was in the 19th century we had no way to tap collective action. All collective action, we didn't have an internet, we didn't have cell phones, so all collective action had to be channeled through those very same bureaucracies. They used to be royalist bureaucracies, then they were federalist bureaucracies, and the idea would be socialist bureaucracies, but they were the same bureaucracies. And you ended up with this sort of individual action channeled through institutions. And those institutions took all of that sort of spontaneity and vibrancy and variety and turned them into the dead hand, which is why you saw what happened to communism and Marxism, et cetera. Essentially failed models, not because there was something wrong with individual action, but because something wrong with channeling it through bureaucracies. Socialism redefined is about the notion of socialism without the state. And I think it's again an attempt to sort of reclaim a word, in the way that we sort of reclaim the word queer and destigmatize it. We're going to try to reclaim the word socialism and destigmatize it, and to sort of extract the good without the sort of the bureaucratic bad. So I have two chapters. A chapter on the non-monetary economies of reputation and attention. Those are, there are fixed. We assume that at any given time there's a fixed amount of attention in the world, and there's a fixed amount of reputation in the world. There's also a fixed amount of dollars in the world, and we've assumed that it was all about the dollar side, that these non-monetary markets weren't really economies at all. But now we're seeing what non-monetary factors can do. That getting attention credits or reputation credits are sufficient to motivate you to do things that you otherwise had to be paid for. We're starting to formalize those attention and reputation economies. So how do you do that? Well, the way we formalize the attention economy is, on the web, is simple traffic, and we monetize it with dollars. The way we formalize the reputation economy is that there's lots of different reputation economies. So there's your Twitter followers and your PageRank and your Technorati rank and your Facebook friends and et cetera, and your, within video games, which are a fascinating experiment in free business models, you have, experience points, status, gold, et cetera. All of those are micro economies, largely micro reputation economies, and they all have the dynamics of real economies. You end up with central bankers. You end up with money flows. You end up with inflation and deflation. Sometimes they're convertible currencies. Sometimes even convertible out to dollars again. In secondary markets for virtual goods. So the simple answer is that there are, it's a mistake to just look at it as a monetary economy, and you have to recognize that there are at least 3 economies going on out there, and if you can achieve wealth in one economy, it's relatively easy to convert to another. I'll give you an example. So the book Free, and I'm surprised this wasn't the first question that came out here. The book Free will be free. Not just because you guys got it for free, but the digital forms where the marginal cost of production is 0 will be free. The ebook, the audiobook, the web book, the audiobook in various forms, abridged and unabridged, they're all going to be free in one form or another. Sometimes as part of a package deal, so if you pay for the hardcover, you get the audiobook for free, but you get the abridged audiobook for free. Meanwhile, the unabridged one, the whole audiobook, is available for free to anybody. So why would we give away the whole thing and charge you for half the book? And that's because, in fact, for an audiobook, the abridged form is better. It's 3 hours versus 6 hours. Time is money. So if you want you want to get the free audiobook, that's 6 hours of your time I'll be asking for. Thanks very much. If you want the abridged form at 3 hours, buy the hardcover. If you buy the hardcover, you're my best customer. You get all the other forms for free. The ebook, the web book, et cetera. So now why am I giving away my book in every way, shape, and form? Because I'm not really in the business of selling. Now, first of all, I believe it will sell more books, but frankly, I don't really care. I'm not in the business of selling books. Those of you who have any experience with the book industry, you'll have heard what my agent told me, my book agent, my literary agent. He said, if you ever see a royalty check, I will have failed you. And what that means is that agents are there to achieve the highest possible advance. And if you ever see a royalty check, it means that you actually made more to the publishing company than your advance. You covered your advance, which meant that he could have actually charged more for the advance. So the ideal book model is that you never see a royalty check. You don't care whether a book is sold. What you care, so what do you use free for? You use free to achieve celebrity. I'm, to be completely candid about this, and I'm going to exaggerate a little bit for rhetorical effect, but I'm in the me business, right? My job, and this is in a sense all of your jobs is to self-promote yourself. Your job is to achieve celebrity. Sometimes mass celebrity, sometimes narrow celebrity, whether that celebrity is reputation or simply attention. Your job is to be known, and to be known for something that has some value. And then your second job is to convert that celebrity into money or a better job or whatever it is you want. So I use free to spread my ideas with my name attached as far as wide as possible to the largest possible audience. Then I'll figure out how to turn it into money. Business authors like me make more money from speaking than we do from books. About 5 times as much from speaking as from books. So if I use free to propagate my ideas around the world to millions of people, and some small fraction of them want to invite me in to customize the message to them, and pay me a lot of money to fly to China and give the speech, that's a great model. That's a better model than selling books. And that is actually the music model. Bands these days give away their music and sell their tours. You give away the abundance, the recorded form of the music, because the marginal cost is 0. You sell the scarcity, your time. I'll be passing the hat after this speech. But that's it. It's the touring model. It's the rock band touring model. If you're the Rolling Stones, 90%, 95% of your revenues come from tours, not from music. Music is simply a marketing device. The recorded aspect of music which can be distributed for free, is just an advertisement for the scarce part, which can't. And that's the way I feel about free books as well. Yeah, what's scarce? So, I mean, you're right to phrase the question that way. I mean, you can only make money off scarcity. So what's still scarce? Well, time is still scarce. You know, again, as an author, I can make money off my time, but I can't make money off my words. What else is scarce? You know, I mean, we still live in the world of atoms. So, you know, land is still scarce. You know, experience is still scarce. You know, you still need to eat. You still need to, you know, wear clothes, roof over your head, etc. So those things are still scarce. I mean, you know, this is one of these kind of, you know, this question about services versus manufacturing has been going on for many years. You know, sometimes the pendulum overswings. The United Kingdom went from a manufacturing economy to a services economy. That worked okay for them. Not sure it's going to work equally well for us. We probably should still make stuff, but you know, you know, when you make, so let me give you an example. So my robotics company on the side. This is super geeky. This is like this is taking you way outside the publishing world. We do drones. We do aerial robots. Open source. We give away all the intellectual property. So we're competing with defense contractors. Defense contractors charge millions of dollars for Predators. And that what you're paying for is intellectual property by and large. I mean, what is a chip? You know, a microchip is sand, which costs a penny, and intellectual property, which costs $100. Well, we give away the intellectual property. And we say, here's our code, here's our printed circuit board designs, here's our firmware, here's everything you can make it. You can have it all. It's all Creative Commons, Apache 2.0, et cetera. So how do we have a business? Well, we say, if you want us to make it for you, we'll be charging you, you know, 2.6 times cost. That's actually what the economics work, is 40% for us and 40% for our retail partners. 2.6 times cost. And it turns out that 99.99999% of people want us to make it for them. So they're paying us for the atoms, and we charge a fair price for the atoms, but we gave away the bits for free. The reason we gave away the bits for free is because it builds a community. It builds a community, and it builds a community of trust. So now these people are like, whoa, I totally understand it. I trust you. I like you. I know I can modify this. I have some control over this. And because of that community of trust that we built around the free side, we're able to build a market for the paid side. So I don't know whether my little robotics company is the future of Detroit. Probably not. But I think there's something to that. There's something to that kind of community around atoms, where the bits build the community, but the atoms monetize it, is probably right. That's, by the way, my title of my next book is Atoms Are the New Bits, The Future of American Industry, until I get bored. And then maybe I'll have a book after that. I mean, God, it's all, you know, where do I start? I mean, it's absolutely, everything about it is stunning. It's stunning how long our process is. It's stunning how many steps there are. You know, we have, I mean, at Wired we have, basically, I mean, we're racing to finish our September issue. And we're pretty far along our January and February issues. So the pipeline, the length of time it takes, we have 17 steps along the process involving, design and fact and copy, and then 3 levels of editing and display type, and then, reviews and the whole production process. I mean, just assigning photographers. Just what I've learned about sort of how to, we send products. So if we're going to photograph a watch or something like that, we'll send it to Germany. Because the best photographer for watches, these kind of watches, is in Germany. And it turns out it's cheaper. It doesn't cost much to send watches by FedEx to Germany to be photographed and sent back. We're completely globalized, and we're constantly. Our biggest problem right now is language barriers between trying to explain an infographic to a Japanese artist, because that's the style we want. I know nothing about design, and we just won our second ASME for design, and I know nothing about design. So needless to say, I'm not doing the design, but I know what I like, and I hire people who are great at design, and then I just watch them work, and it's just, our next cover is, which I can't tell you about, but we created a soundstage in Hollywood. So now I'm in the soundstage business, So I mean, the realities of publishing on our scale were just so surprising to me. And then we're also long form. So we do narrative. That was a new form, new voice for me. And then being edited by was also interesting. I mean, I think everybody needs an editor, and I'm not just saying that as an editor. I love being edited, what my book editor does is largely outline coaching. We work through outline after outline after outline, and once I wrote the words, that was pretty, that was easy. But outline coaching, it's really thought. You're editing thinking, you're editing ideas, you're editing the coherence of the concept. That's the important part. The words, words are sort of secondary. The words, if you get the coherence right, the words just write themselves. I was just talking to Don on the way in that I don't remember actually writing this last book. I mean, I must have done it at some point. I remember thinking about it. I remember talking to people. I remember the insights. I remember research. I remember interviews. I don't remember writing it. And I think it's because once I got those other things right, the book sort of wrote itself. I certainly remember writing the first one. Yeah, so I mean, that's what happens, is you get a lot of innovation. You try a lot of things down here in the niches. Some of them get traction. They move up the curve, and they become hits. So that's the kind of the bottoms-up innovation model, and that works great. Other things move a little up the curve, but never really to the hit level. They become sort of, tiny niche to less tiny niche. And other things remain niche all along. And I mean, I think, we used to measure success in terms of popularity. And it's like, if you weren't, if you think about it, the old models were all very binary. You were either a hit or you were a failure, right? I mean, you either made a movie or you didn't make a movie. You either got picked up by a major label or you didn't get picked up by a major label. You either got signed by a publisher or you didn't get signed by a publisher. There was really no middle ground. And so as a result, almost everybody was by definition a failure. I was in bands, probably many of you were in bands, wasn't picked up by a major label. I am by definition in that model a failure. And there's something wrong with an industry that basically fails 99.9% of all participants, because it's too binary distinction. Obviously, there's different degrees of success, but if the only model was you either cross the Rubicon or you don't, then you end up collapsing the potential function. Basically, everybody, almost everything fails, and as a result, a lot of good stuff gets thrown out along with the bad. What we now have is, because there's different levels of success, you can have 10,000. Kevin Kelly, one of the co-founders of Wired, talks about 1,000 true fans. You can build a business around 1,000 true fans. If a band sells 10,000 records, that's a business. If a book sells 10,000 copies, that's a business. If a website, our robotics website gets about 20,000 viewers a day. We've built, because we're not actually selling on a page view model, we're selling hardware. We've built it's about $1 million business off that. That's a business. We're not GE. But it's a business. It pays for one and a half people's full-time jobs. So again, the old model stigmatized niches as failure, and the new model identifies niches as a different form of engagement that you don't necessarily monetize with mass market business models like advertising, but are still, that's 1,000 true fans. That's 10,000 true fans. That's value, and you can build something off that. So I mean, he's kind of joking when he says that, so he runs an auction when they auction the book, and the auction is to get the highest advance. And if you ran the auction, and as you know about the winner's curse and all that, auctions are designed to basically punish the winner, get the winner to pay slightly more than they should have. So, and the way the book industry works is that they get you advance, and then you sell books. And these books, as they sell books, they pay down your advance. Until if they sell more books than your advance anticipated, then they send you a royalty check. So, tell me if I'm not answering the question, but if I get royalty checks, and by the way, I did get royalty checks, so he failed me. What this means is that the book resonated with audiences. I forget whether the book is better or worse, because I reject quality words anymore. I don't know what good and bad means anymore. Relevant or not relevant, I understand. Resonant or not resonant, I understand. If the book sold more than the advance anticipated, that means that it found an audience larger than was expected. And sometimes that audience is international. I mean, the book's, The Long Tail's been published in 42 countries. So, every day, there's a check in the mailbox. $27 from Croatia. That's kind of the usual day. And so I don't know who those audiences are. The Long Tail was the most pirated book in China in 2007. I'm incredibly proud of that. I mean, think about that. What does that mean? That means that that enough people photocopied that book, printed it, and bound it, and stuck it on their table on a street corner in Shenzhen. They didn't do that because my marketing department convinced them to do it. They didn't do it because, because we paid them to do it. They did it because there was organic demand. They did it. They sat there on that dusty street corner, and behind that table, having photocopied my book because they believed it would sell. And that is the most exciting or authentic demand I can imagine. I was not expecting any money from China. I didn't get any money from China, but I was thrilled to see it resonate like that. To your second point, you're absolutely right. What happens is that there's a whole chapter on this called The Psychology of Free, and it's about the penny gap. And basically, you're right, it doesn't asymptotically go 10 cents, 5 cents, 1 cent, 0. What happens is it goes like $1, and then they're like, screw it, 0. And once you get into pennies, the psychological costs outweigh the economic costs. And there's this, I talk about it in the book, but there's this like psychological flag that comes up when you see a price, and you say, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And you can just like just not even bring up that flag in the first place. It actually, it lets people, it lowers the barrier to entry. It lets people engage more quickly. So micropayments tend not to work because they have all the psychological downsides of a price without the economic upsides of a big price. To your first question, which was about, oh yeah. So let me just ask you a question. Do you think Google is a worse search engine because it's free?
But that's completely like there was no such thing where I was used to paying $10 for my
Precisely. Yeah. So I have a whole chapter about that as well. It has to do with your expectations. So the two counterexamples are the Village Voice and Google. So the Village Voice went from paid to free, and a lot of people say, oh, that was the day the Village Voice, stopped mattering or lost quality. You get what you pay for, et cetera. So because assumptions had been set at a price, and that price was set to 0, there was an associated assumption of decline of quality. Whereas Google was launched into a world where digital stuff was supposed to be free, and so our expectations were different. We don't expect them to be paid, and as a result, we don't apply the sort of you get what you pay for calculus to it. So your two questions very neatly anticipated 2 chapters in the book. That's just not going to happen. That's not what the book says. It's the sort of if the bane of my existence with The Long Tail was the misunderstanding that it was the death of the blockbuster, when it was in fact the death of the monopoly of the blockbuster, the bane of my existence for free is going to be the what happens when everything gets free, which is never going to happen. What I'm saying is that free is going to be one of the prices. Everything competes with free. So free will be a price out there in the marketplace. Everything will be available in a free form. And the question is, does the paid form appeal? Does the paid form seem to offer sufficiently, is it sufficiently better than the free form to be worth paying for? So, the books being a classic example. I mean, does the hardcover in your hand feel more valuable than the digital one in your Kindle or your iPhone? If the answer is, I like physical books, I like putting them on my shelf, I like leafing through them, I like the battery life, I like not having to buy a reader, then the answer is yes, that competes with free. If the CD in your pocket does not feel like it adds value to the MP3 in your iPod, then maybe you're not going to pay for it. And I think that's basically what you found. The atoms, the paid form of music turned out to be a value subtract medium. It was you didn't want 15 songs, you wanted 1 song. You didn't want it in CD form, you wanted it in MP3 form. You had to rip it, et cetera. So that went away because it didn't add value. I think the book still does add value and will continue to be able to compete with free. I know everything I do is Creative Commons. Everything I do that isn't paid for by Condé Nast or Disney is Creative Commons. Everything I write is Creative Commons. All my code is Creative Commons. Absolutely every word I issue that isn't paid for by those 2 employers is under Creative Commons. I personally, one of the other contradictions is that in my personal life, I don't believe in intellectual property. I don't believe in charging for intellectual property. I don't believe in protecting intellectual property. And in my professional life, all my checks come from protecting intellectual property. By day, I fiercely defend copyright. By night, I attempt to destroy it. Go figure. Yes. I think hope is an essential human function. I'm incredibly optimistic. Hope is not actually a word I use very often. I use optimism. Is that the same thing?
No, I think hope is an expectation of some kind, longing and an expectation, a belief. I don't know. We could debate that.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to get your reaction. I'm just sitting here mulling it over. I was thinking about your bloggers, wondering what they really are expecting beyond reputation at some point.
Oh, so okay. So let me. I'll get. I'm not sure I can actually answer your question the way you phrase it, but let's talk about it. So Ken Denmead is the editor of Geek Dad. I started Geek Dad and sort of build an audience, and then I said, I'm not doing a good job of running this blog. I don't have enough time, et cetera. So I'm gonna put out an open call to our readers to have people contribute. And a bunch of people applied, and I picked 24 of them, and they started writing, and I got to see who was good and who was bad. And one of them turned out to be an okay writer, actually quite a good writer, but a really great organizer. There was a kind of natural leadership quality to this guy. His name Ken. I invited him to take over the blog. And Ken is if he were standing here, he's a middle-aged guy. He's kind of a largish guy. He is a civil engineer. He's working on the subway extension from San Francisco down to the airport. He's good at his job, but he'd always dreamed of being a writer. He never got a chance. Never got a chance. He wasn't in this class. He didn't know the right path. He always dreamed of being a writer. He likes his job, but there was more to him than just his job. He has built Geek Dad tenfold since he took over. It's a real business. He's now signed a book deal to do the Geek Dad book. He's thrilled about it. His kids are thrilled about it. He's a busy guy, but he's a happy guy. He's more fulfilled than he was otherwise. How is he going to monetize it? If he doesn't really need to. He's got a day job, right? He's monetizing it emotionally. He is a more fulfilled person. He has achieved one of his life's aims. He achieved a dream. What's the value of that?
That might be a hope economy.
Yeah. When I look at Ken and I think how many Kens there are out there, that's where my optimism comes from. So to the list of paradoxes and ironies, I don't run the website. I contribute much of the content on the website, but I don't actually run it. So my ability to do those experiments myself are somewhat limited. All these projects I've described are all outside of the. Again, because I don't run the website, I'm inclined to do lots of experiments. I do them under my own auspices. So, you probably heard about conflicts of interest and the importance of journalistic neutrality and about how journalists shouldn't be paid, et cetera. I don't accept any of that. I'm totally conflicted. I'm very transparent about my conflicts, but I have companies on the side. As I said, I just sold one to Amazon. I do business with companies that we work with. I disclose all of it. I believe highly in transparency, but as a result, and this little distinction: Chinese walls. Church and state, 20th century, arrogance. The idea that editorial people shouldn't be involved in business. Good luck. I have my business hat on right now, and I'm going to keep having my business hat on. So is John, and anybody smart in this industry is going to be thinking about the business of what they do as much as the content. The content, I can hire great editorial people. We won a design award, and I know nothing about design. My job is to find a sustainable business model for what we do going forward, and that means throwing out a lot of these kind of, I think ultimately silly presumptions about the sacred state of journalism. I think you earn your trust with your audience day by day, story by story, writer by writer. This is a world where where the distinctions between professionals and amateurs are blurred. The distinction between journalism and non-journalism, between media and non-media, completely blurred. People are establishing their new metrics of what they trust, and it's based on what have you done? Have you earned my trust over time? And I don't think there's any formal structure you can set up. If I can tell people we've got church and state, we've got Chinese walls, they don't care. They honestly don't care. What they care is, after having read you, can I believe Can I believe you? Can I believe you? Can I trust what you say? I'm going way off your question, but I want to tell you guys one little story. How many of you come from the magazine industry or have experience with magazine industries? Hands up. Okay, so you guys probably know about, or even in newspapers, you probably know about the idea that you shouldn't put an advertiser next to relevant content. So you wouldn't have like a Sony review and a Sony ad next to that, and that would be a naughty thing, right? Have any of you sort of thought about how when you go online, what does Google do? If Google sees a Sony review, what do they put next to it? A Sony ad, right? That's called relevance. So I brought my friend from Google into our office, and we have this magazine wall where we have the magazine stories and we have the ads, and we explain how we keep them apart. Here's the Sony review, and here's the Sony ad. Here's the car page, and here's the car ad. Keep this advertised apart, and he just stares at me with his jaw on the floor. He says, "You've got to be kidding." So we do exactly the opposite. We put ad and content together because that's what people want. That's relevant. And I'm thinking, why is it that what we do in print, these assumptions we make about the separation of the two in print, turn out to be exactly the opposite of what people do online? Now, there's only two answers to this. One is that people have very different expectations and assumptions about print than they do online. Maybe. And the other, which I think is much more likely, is that we were wrong. We were wrong, we were arrogant, we were fooling ourselves. We actually didn't know how people felt about ads being next to content. We set up these rituals, again, in the 20th century, we had monopoly ownership, and so we considered ourselves having a sacred trust, the Fourth Estate and all this kind of stuff. And we assumed we needed to set up these almost judicial level barriers to protect the integrity of this Fourth Estate. We actually never asked readers what they thought. Now we go online, it turns out they don't care. They actually don't care. They evaluate our quality and our integrity on a story by story, author by author, brand by brand, title by title basis. So if you go to our website, we put the two together like everybody else does. Google puts the two together like everybody else does. I think I think that John is right to have his business hat on. I'm going to have my business hat on. I would encourage all of you to think about business and business models as much as you are thinking about creative, because you've got to get them both right to succeed.
So it's okay to put ads on the cover?
Again, I'll do what works. But I'm not going to do just what works. We have two audiences here. We have a business audience, and if I put an ad on the cover and undermines my relationship with my readership, I won't do it. I'm not intending. Now, the reason I don't put ads on the cover is because ASME will disqualify me. We win a lot of ASMEs, and ASME will disqualify me. I'm going to do what works. And this, I'm going to do what works for the readership. I'm fundamentally, my job is fundamentally to maintain a relationship with our readers that works for them. And if I do that right, I'll be able to build business models around it. I won't violate my trust with the readers before I violate my trust, to achieve an advertising gain. But I'm not going to walk in with any presumptions about what does or does not violate that trust. So, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think there should be rules. I think rules are stupid, frankly. So I don't. You're looking at a guy who basically I have less ability to predict the future every year. Whatever rules we had, 5 years ago, or have been tossed out the window. We don't know what the new rules are. We're figuring it out as we go. I don't believe in rules. There's a rule. No rules. Where do we start? Yeah, that's what we do. Last year we had a TV show, Wired Science. Yesterday on Monday we had a business conference called Disrupted by Design. Jeff Bezos, Jeff Melt, etc. We have a store every holiday season. We have a store here in New York called the Wired Store. We have radio shows. We have podcasts. Wired Playlist is great, by the way. We have. God, what else do we have? We have something called NextFest, which is a big festival, big sort of science fair festival. We've got all our spin-off brands. We've got Reddit. We've got, Geek Dad. We've got, all the sub-brands of the blogs. Danger Rooms, our fantastic defense, blog. We've got Ars Technica. We are, we have more things that, more things, well, there's the print magazine, there's the web content, and that is just like the tip of the iceberg. And everything else is just brand extension. And the problem is, of course, that some things are under wired brands, some of them are not. So different mediums, some of them are words, more of them are videos and pictures. Again, it's a messy world, and brand management, sort of this basket of brands, and figuring out how to extend your brand in different domains is kind of the job these days. I spend very little time editing a magazine. A lot of time thinking about exactly this kind of stuff. Was that what you meant? Or, okay, yeah. You'll see much more of this going forward. We as brands have only touched the retail side. I think it's very interesting to think of ourselves as retail arms as well. Another way of blurring the lines and offending ASME. This question about how do we develop the user. I mean, everyone is different. I wish I could tell you we had this we have the Just Add user-generated sauce that we just sprinkled on it. We have Reddit, and you guys know Dig. So Reddit is like the number 2 in that space. It's the user-generated news and voting thing. Reddit is like 3 guys. It's some software. Most days they don't come in. The lights are off. It's 80 million page views. They got the formula right. They got the formula right, and it kind of solves itself. Then we've got, we do have formal contests and participations. Some work, some don't work. I'm just running a contest right now to give away my book. This is really, we spend a lot of time thinking of sneaky ways to reset people's expectations of engagement. So the way we're giving away the book is, one way is the traditional way. You just prove to us that you deserve it. Page rank, Technorati rank, for friends, Twitter followers, things like that. The other way is that you need to, we're going to give you 4 books. And if you, we'll give you 4 books, and if you will tell us 3 people you know who are kind of cool and influential, or whatever, just 3 impressive people you know them well enough to know their mailing address. If you can tell us who they are, we will send you 4 books, and the FedEx labels, and the FedEx envelopes. And then you send the other 3 to your friends, and we track that in real time and put it on Google Maps so we can watch the word of mouth recommendation network in real time. And so we'll see how that works. So again, every user engagement opportunity is starting anew. Who are we trying to reach? What would work? What's compelling? Where's the call to action? What's fun? How do we keep the barriers to entry low enough that people participate? If you do something like simple, like put up comments, usually it fails. Actually, it turns out that almost all the conversation about our content is not on our own site. It's really annoying. I wish people would all comment on our site, but they don't. We get sort of random, low-quality comments on our site, and really smart comments in Twitter, on various other blogs. I mean, I was just at CNN yesterday talking about Iran. Have you guys followed CNN, #CNNFail? So we were talking about the CNN coverage of Iran, the Iranian elections. And one of the problems is that the fire, CNN came under a lot of criticism for its undercoverage of the Iranian elections. And the problem is that a lot of the fire started not on their own site. It was out there on Twitter. And they were following a little bit, but they didn't know how important it was and how to respond. And by the time they figured out there was a problem, they didn't have a mechanism to put out that fire, and so it became something of a disaster. This is sort of what happens: is that the best laid plans. You set up a user engagement thing, and whatever the one thing you can be sure of is not going to work the way you intended. You set up comments; they comment elsewhere. You set up a game; they hack the game. Or more likely, you set up some incredibly clever user engagement, user participation thing, and they ignore it. So I wish I could give you a simple answer that it's, here's this bit of code, this JavaScript that we just paste, and every time it's miraculously successful. But unfortunately, it's all about sort of thinking cleverly about what would work here and what's easy and fun and different, and and then it's not just the user engagement on the site; it's also the buzz about the little exercise that you've constructed. So it's all self-promotion. It's all trying to find ways to break through the clutter. Yeah, so that was my point earlier. It's not the death of the blockbuster, it's the death of the monopoly of the blockbuster. I mean, absolutely, there's still a place for common culture. There's still a place for curated culture. There's still a place for, you know, the mass media. I mean, that's the business I'm in, right? We're in Vogue, Vanity Fair, New Yorker, you know, Self. You know the magazines we put out. We're in the mass media business, and we're doing fine. Our circ is up. So there is definitely that place. It's just not the only place. And the mass has to compete with the niche. And it turns out that there's less mass than there was. That, you know, the masses, as you saw with that chart that I drew and that I invented of Nielsen viewership, the mass is less mass for most of it. So television ratings are going down and always will. Radio ratings are going down. You know, newspaper readership is going down. Most mass is getting less mass, but there's still a place for it.
You mentioned soundstage production for
Yeah.
the next issue.
So we're not rethinking. So we actually are not thinking about lowering the quality of the magazine. I mean, you know, we all have the same job. Everyone in this room has the same job, whether you know it or not. Your job is to add value to the internet. Do something that isn't already out there on the internet. And, you know, the way we add value in print is we use print to its fullest. You know, it happens to be an issue that wasn't super photographic, so I'm not gonna find a particularly good example. But you know, our job is to do photography, packaging. This is a visual medium, and it really doesn't work online. You know, you go online and you have the words are fine, the photographs are thumbnails, the design's gone, the infographics are separated. You know, we designed it as a package. It doesn't work as a package online. These are individual units that work to varying degrees. We add value to the internet, and our circuit, we've never been bigger. We're 750,000 this year. We climbed 50,000, you know, over the last 12 months, or all of the circ things are going up. And the reason being is that this stands out in an internet age. Now, not everybody knows about the print magazine, so awareness is an issue, but once they experience the print magazine, it's clear that it's not just the website printed on paper. Condé Nast stands for that. I mean, we are number one in every category we're in. We tend to be the number one title. We tend to be the number one title because we've always invested in quality, Annie Leibovitz photographs, you know, et cetera. That's why we get the ASMEs, et cetera. That, we think, is how we add value to the internet, and that's why we have a place in the 21st century. By the way, if Jeff Bezos invents a device called the Kindle, you know, double DX, it's actually kind of a good title. They should do that. Yeah. That can do this form factor or something close to it and color, I will stop killing trees overnight. Just like that. I don't care about paper. I care about the visual impact of what we do. I care about packaging ideas with all these components. So we're agnostic about technology platforms, but we're not agnostic about the quality and the power of turning ideas into a visual experience. And that's why we're not going to cut on that. We're not going to cut those budgets.
We have one more question, but you have to be.
I do.
Does anyone else have any?
So Kindle right now is black and white,
Right.
and a smaller form factor. It's kind of just optimized for books, not magazines. So it's you know, if you turn it sideways, you get a single page, not a spread. Right. They're on your computer, so you know they haven't succeeded. People, by and large, would rather not, you know, read a magazine sitting in a chair, looking at a screen. They'd rather see it in their lap. They'd rather be something they carry with them. In the same way that e-books on computer screens haven't worked, but e-books on portable devices have. So I think it's really kind of it's an experience that, you know, there's this experience and there is that experience, and, you know, call it lean forward, lean back, whatever. This turns out to be different. I mean, we'll continue to do the digital editions downloadable, but I don't think that's a game changer. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much.